What is the scariest thing you've ever seen in your life that you can't explain? Story 1. When I was 14, my dad took me and my cousin camping in this state forest that was basically just a patch of black on Google Maps. No cell service, nearest town 40 minutes away. We set up our tents by a small clearing and made a fire. Normal, cozy horror movie setup. Around 1 a.m., the fire was just embers and my dad had gone to sleep in his own tent. My cousin and I were whispering when we heard branches cracking. Not the little twig snaps. Heavy, deliberate steps circling the clearing. We killed our lantern so we could see better past the light. The moon was bright enough to light the tree line. That's when we saw something. It was tall. Too tall. Whatever it was standing between two trees on the edge of the clearing, and its head was level with the first branches, like 7 to 8 feet up. But it wasn't bulky like a bear, and it wasn't human-shaped either. It was wrong. Way too thin, like a stretched shadow, but solid. No eyes, no features, just a vertical shape that somehow looked like it was facing us. We both froze. Then it moved, but not like walking. It kind of slid sideways behind another tree without the upper part bobbing, just this smooth glide that made my stomach flip. More branches cracked, but not in the direction it moved. It sounded like it was circling us again, even though visually it had just gone left. The sounds and the movement didn't line up. My cousin whispered, "Do you see that?" And I nodded. We didn't wake my dad because we were too scared to even breathe too loud. At some point I blinked and suddenly it was morning. I don't remember falling asleep. Last thing I remember is staring at the tree line, listening for it. My cousin has the same gap. Dark clearing, both of us staring. Hard cut to daylight and my dad shaking the tent, asking why we'd slept with our shoes on. Here's the part I hate the most. There were deep impressions in the dirt around the dead fire, like something had walked a slow circle around our camp. Long, oval prints in a perfect ring. Dad thought we did it as a prank. But my cousin and I still can't explain how we both blacked out at the same time with the same last memory. And the same thing in the trees. Story 2. I used to work nights as a CNA in a small hospital. On weekends, it was usually just me, one nurse, and the poor security guy trying not to fall asleep at his screens. One night, I was charting at the nurse's station when I heard Mr. Ramirez in room 214 calling out. He was a sweet old guy with late-stage cancer, barely strong enough to sit up. I went in, helped him sip some water, straightened his blankets, and we chatted for a minute. He asked what time it was. 2:07 a.m., I remember because I checked, and then he said, "You shouldn't be here when it happens." I asked, "When what happens?" He just shook his head, smiled, and closed his eyes. I went back to the station. 5 minutes later, the security guy comes over, looking pale. "Were you just in 214? He asks. "Yeah, why?" He swivels one of the monitors toward me. Camera feed from the second-floor hallway. On the screen, you can clearly see my back as I walk into 214. Except I'm still sitting at the station, staring at the chart when he's showing me this. I thought he'd pulled some old footage, but the timestamp matched the clock exactly. 2:07 a.m. The feed showed me entering 214 and then never coming back out. The door just stayed closed. We checked the other cameras. Every exit, every stairwell, the elevators, nothing. Only one version of me existed on those, the one sitting at the station. But that hallway cam showed both realities like it couldn't decide which one was true. We went to 214 together. Mr. Ramirez was gone. No code, no alarms, no change in his vitals before that. He just passed. Peaceful, like he'd gone to sleep. Time of death was called at 2:12 a.m. The hallway camera for that hour glitched permanently afterward. Static and weird frozen frames. IT had to replace it. They blamed the wiring. I watched the footage 100 times before they wiped it. I can't explain what I saw. Me walking into his room at the exact same time I know I was sitting at the station, and him telling me, "You shouldn't be here when it happens." Story 3. This happened when I was 19, driving home from my girlfriend's place at like 3 a.m. It was a rural area, just one long 2-lane road with fields on either side and this tiny town you had to pass through. Call it Oak Ridge. I'd driven that route 100 times. You go past the Welcome to Oak Ridge sign, pass a gas station with a broken letter, G-A-M-S-H-U, a diner, one traffic light, then out the other side in about 2 minutes. That night, I passed the sign. Gas station on my right, diner on the left, light turns yellow. I slow a bit, roll through town, no other cars, no people. Kind of eerie but normal for 3 a.m. 5 minutes later, I see another Welcome to Oak Ridge sign. I assume it's a different town with the same name or I zoned out. But then I see the gas station. Same broken letter, same flickering open 24 HRS sign, same overflowing trash can. Diner on the left, Traffic light turning yellow again right as I approach. I get that stomach drop feeling, like cresting a roller coaster. I deliberately look at my dashboard clock. 3:17 a.m. I drive through, heart pounding, staring at every detail. When I exit the town again, I crank the radio, roll down the windows, do everything I can to stay hyper-aware. After a bit of dark, empty road and fields. Welcome to Oak Ridge. Same sign, same dent, same gas station. The trash bag tied to the side of the can was even flapping the same way. Clock reads 3:17 a.m. I don't mean time passed weird or I misread it. I mean the exact same minute. 3 times. I remember because I grabbed my phone to check that clock too, thinking my car was glitching. 3:70. No seconds ticking up, just stuck. My phone refused to update. No signal, no nothing. I finally lost it and pulled over on the shoulder, put my head on the steering wheel and said out loud, I want to go home. Please. I looked up and suddenly I was at the freeway on-ramp that comes after Oak Ridge. No town in sight behind me, just empty highway. Clock said 3:29 a.m. Like nothing happened. I drove that road at least 50 more times before moving away. Oak Ridge was normal every other time. 1 pass, 2 minutes. I've never seen the time freeze again. I have no idea what I drove through that night, but it felt like something didn't want me to leave, until it changed its mind. Story 4. When my daughter was about 6 months old, we had one of those baby monitors with audio and a little camera. We're paranoid first-time parents, so we always kept the monitor on our nightstand, volume up. One night, around 2 a.m., I woke up to what I thought was the monitor crackling. White noise, little pops, nothing unusual. I glanced at the screen. She was sleeping, tiny butt in the air like always. Then I heard a voice come through the speaker. Clear, calm, young, maybe teenage. Mom? Can you hear me? Please wake up. I sat bolt upright. The hair on my arms stood up instantly. The voice didn't sound like anyone I knew. It also didn't sound like it was in the room. It was absolutely coming from the monitor. I shook my husband awake. Do you hear that? We both stared at the monitor, which still showed our baby alone in her crib. Room dark, except for the nightlight. The voice came again. Same girl, same tone. Please, wake up. Don't go in there. My husband grabbed the monitor, thinking maybe it was picking up a neighbor's baby cam or some kind of interference. He turned the volume up and down, changed channels, nothing changed. The video feed never flickered away from our nursery. Then there was a sound like someone covering the microphone with their hand and muffled whispering we couldn't quite make out. I picked up the actual receiver from the nursery and shook it. Pressed the talk button. Everything. No difference. The girl kept talking, like we weren't responding right. You're not listening, she said, and her voice cracked like she was about to cry. He's already there. Please don't go in. That was the moment I realized she was talking about the nursery. My husband and I just froze. No logical part of my brain could explain it. Every instinct screamed at me to run and grab my baby. But the words, don't go in there, were looping in my head like a warning. Then, without either of us touching the monitor, the screen went pitch black. Not off, just black. A second later, the image came back. But now the camera was at a slightly different angle, like someone had bumped it. Our daughter was still asleep. Nothing else was in frame. The girl's voice said, so quiet we barely heard it, okay, you're safe now. The feed cut to static for half a second and then went completely normal. No more interference. Time on the display, 2:11 a.m. We checked the entire house, every lock, every closet, attic access, everything. No sign of a break-in, no weird sounds, nothing. Our baby slept through the whole thing. We replaced the monitor the next day. I still have that old one in a box in the garage. I can't bring myself to throw it away. It feels like I owe that girl, whoever, whenever she was, at least that much. Story 5. This is going to sound fake, but it's burned into my brain. I was on a red-eye flight, window seat, middle of the plane. It was one of those quiet, dim flights where everyone's half asleep, shades down, cabin lights off. We were flying over the ocean according to the map on the screen. Nothing but blue below. At some point, I woke up because my ears popped weirdly, like we were changing altitude too fast. The cabin felt heavy, pressurized in a way I can't really describe. The air felt thicker. I flipped my shade up just a bit to look outside. We weren't over the ocean. There was nothing beneath us. No stars, no city lights, no moon reflection on water. Just this dark, grayish void that didn't look like clouds, didn't look like sky, didn't look like anything I've ever seen. It was like staring into static on an old TV, but three-dimensional, moving very slowly. As I watched, a shape formed in it. Not a plane, not a storm, not a UFO in the classic sense. More like an outline. The vague silhouette of another airplane, flying upside down directly under us, perfectly parallel. Same size, same wingspan, just an absence of light in the shape of a plane. I could see nothing in it. No windows, no lights. Just a darker outline in the gray, nothing. Then, for a fraction of a second, I saw the interior. Not of our plane, theirs. I saw rows of seats lit by some harsh white light. Empty. Every seat. No passengers, no crew. Just an entire cabin of vacant seats like a showroom. I swear I saw our airline's logo on one of the headrests, but it was backwards and flickering, like I was seeing a reflection from somewhere that didn't quite line up. There was a horrible feeling in my stomach like falling, except the plane didn't drop. The seatbelt sign wasn't on. No one else reacted. I looked around and everyone was asleep or on their phones. When I looked back, there was only black ocean and the faint line of the horizon. Stars. Normal night sky. The cabin suddenly felt lighter, like my ears clicked back into place. The map on the screen in front of me glitched for a second, lines flickering across the route and then snapped back. Estimated arrival time had jumped forward by 15 minutes. I didn't say anything to the flight attendants. What do you even say? Hey, I think we just flew over our own ghost plane in a pocket of nothing and time skipped a bit. Landing was normal. Turbulence was normal. Everything was normal. Except I have this memory that doesn't fit anywhere in reality. And every time I fly at night now, I fight the urge to keep the shade down and not look outside, just in case we pass that other version of us again. Story 6. I used to clean offices at night in a high-rise downtown. It was one of those glass boxes where every floor looks identical. Same gray carpet, same cubicles, same sad plants. I usually started at 10 p.m. and worked my way up. One Tuesday, the elevator panel lit up weird. Instead of the usual numbers, there was an extra button, 13. Our building didn't have a 13th floor. It jumped from 12 to 14. I thought it was a prank or some maintenance mode. But when I hit it, the doors closed and the elevator started moving. It stopped without dinging. The doors opened to an office floor that looked almost right but not quite. The lighting was too dim, like twilight. The cubicles were there, but all the chairs were pulled out into the aisle, facing the windows. Every single one. There were computers on, but the screens were all black with a white cursor blinking in the top left corner. No wallpaper, no login prompts, nothing. Just that blinking cursor. The air smelled wrong too. Dusty and metallic, like a basement, not an office. I stepped out and called, "Hello?" My voice sounded muffled, like there was insulation everywhere. No echo. No hum of AC, no printers, no vending machines. Just the faint clicking of cursors, even though no one was typing. When I looked out through the windows, the city was there. But it was dark. Completely dark. No streetlights, no traffic, no neon signs. Just a dead city silhouette under a black sky. Even the red blinking lights on the other building's rooftops were gone. I decided I'd seen enough and went back to the elevator. The doors shut the second I turned around, like they'd been waiting. No button lit up, but I felt us moving. Longer than any floor gap should have taken. When the doors opened again, I was on 11, according to the panel. Normal fluorescent lighting. Vending machines humming. City outside, lit up like usual. I turned back to the panel. No 13 button. The next day, I asked the daytime maintenance guy if they were doing work around the 13th floor wiring or something. He laughed and said, "We don't even have a shaft opening there. Elevator goes right past. It's drywall. I've ridden those elevators 100 times since. Never seen that button again. But I can still picture that city with all the lights out like I visited a version of my world where something already happened, and we just haven't caught up yet." Story 7. In college, I shared a cheap off-campus house with 3 other girls. It was old, slanted floors, radiators that clanged at night, the usual. The landlord told us the attic was storage only and had it padlocked. We never thought much about it. One night during midterms, the power went out. No storm, no warning, just everything going dead mid-Netflix. We lit candles and were sitting in the living room when we heard footsteps above us. Not random creaks. Actual footsteps. Slow, deliberate, heel-to-toe pacing back and forth directly over our heads. The attic. We all froze and looked at each other. No one joked. It was too clear, too human. Our first thought was an intruder, so we grabbed the heaviest things we had. Broom, bat, a metal lamp, and went to the attic door. The padlock was still on, sealed, dusty, like it hadn't been touched in years. The footsteps kept going even as we stood right under them. Back and forth. Back and forth. One of my roommates whispered, "Maybe it's pipes?" Then they stopped. Perfectly. Like whoever was up there realized we were listening. The power flicked back on. Just like that. TV blaring, fridge humming, The footsteps started again, running this time, right over us. Then a heavy slam, like a trunk being dropped. We called the landlord and told him someone was in the attic. He came the next morning with bolt cutters, complaining the whole time. When he snapped the lock and opened the door, the dust puffed out in a way that made it obvious. No one had opened it in years. The attic was empty. No furniture, no boxes, just exposed beams and insulation. But there was a dark strip where the dust had been disturbed, going back and forth in a line the length of the attic, like someone had been pacing there. At the far end, right where we heard the slam, there was a perfect clean rectangle on the floor, dust-free in the shape of a trunk or chest, except there was nothing there. The landlord went quiet, then said, "That's where she kept it," and immediately stopped talking. We pushed him, but he just said, "Previous tenant," and changed the subject. We never got the full story, but some nights, even with the power on and music playing, I could swear I heard faint footsteps above my room, walking that same path over and over, guarding something that isn't there anymore. Story 8. When I was 11, my mom and I got into a screaming match about something stupid. Chores or homework, I don't even remember. I slammed my bedroom door and locked it, determined to ignore her. She knocked once, softly. Then I heard her voice right outside the door. "Sweetie, open up. I'm not mad, I just want to talk." I rolled my eyes and shouted, "Leave me alone." She kept talking through the door. Calm, patient. "I know you're angry, but you're going to regret the last thing you said if something happens. You don't want that. Please open the door." We went back and forth like that for a few minutes. I remember her saying my name over and over, telling me she loved me, asking me to unlock it. I finally caved, stomped over, and yanked the door open, ready to yell. Nobody was in the hallway. I thought she'd walked away quickly, so I went storming downstairs to keep the fight going. She wasn't in the kitchen, not in the living room. I walked through the entire house, yelling for her. Nothing. Her car was gone from the driveway. I checked the clock. From the first knock to me opening the door, it had been maybe 5 minutes. I called her cell, furious. She picked up and sounded tired. "I'm in traffic, honey, what's wrong?" I accused her of messing with me. Told her it wasn't funny to sneak out mid-fight and pretend to talk through my door. She went very quiet, then said, "I left for the store as soon as you slammed your door. I decided to give you space. I've been on the highway for 20 minutes. I still remember the silence on the line as I realized how impossible that was. I had heard her. I had argued with her. I could picture her shadow under my door. That night, she came into my room and said something that still freaks me out. "When I was your age, I had the same thing happen with my mom. Same words. Same knocking. I always thought I imagined it. We don't have a ghost story in our family. No tragedy tied to that hallway. No dead relative we think it might be. The only theory we have is some version of her from another time, trying to stop us from saying things we'd regret. It didn't work. But sometimes when I'm really angry, I pause outside a door and listen, just in case someone who loves me is on the other side in a way I can't explain." Story 9. About 5 years ago, I was driving home from a late shift on a 2-lane highway through farm country. It was around 1 a.m. No streetlights, no other cars, just my headlights and the occasional reflectors on fence posts. Up ahead, I saw taillights. Dim, like whoever it was had their foot barely on the brake. I sped up a little, relieved not to be alone on the road. As I got closer, I realized something was off. The lights were too low and too close together, not like any car I'd seen. More like someone had stuck 2 red bike lights a foot off the ground. But they were moving at 60 mph in a straight line. I got close enough to see the outline. There wasn't one. No car shape, no truck, just 2 red points floating exactly in the middle of my lane. I eased off the gas, thinking my depth perception was messed up. The taillights suddenly jerked left, like the vehicle had swerved off the road. I braked, expecting to see it nosedive into the ditch or skid out. Instead, my headlights swept over an empty shoulder. No car, no tracks, no break in the fence, just undisturbed grass. I pulled over, heart pounding, and got out with my phone flashlight. I walked up and down that stretch of road, checked the ditch, checked the field. Nothing. I even looked for broken glass or plastic. The air smelled like wet earth and cow manure. Nothing burnt or metallic. As I stood there, I heard the faint sound of tires on asphalt behind me. I turned and saw those same 2 red lights appear about 200 yards down the road, back in my lane, moving away from me. They didn't rise from the ditch. They just faded into existence already on the road, at the same distance from each other, same height, like someone had hit play on a loop. I got back in my car and drove home doing exactly the speed limit, refusing to look for them again. The next morning, curiosity got me. I checked the local news, thinking maybe there had been an accident on that stretch sometime in the past. Sure enough, 3 years earlier, a guy my age had died there after his car spun out and got hit from behind. The article said his taillights had gone out mid-spin, and that's why the other driver never saw him. I know there's probably some boring explanation involving my headlights and fog or whatever, but I can't shake the feeling I was following the last few seconds of a car that never made it home, replaying forever on that road. Story 10. This one still messes with my sense of reality more than any ghost. My grandpa died when I was 8. He was the kind of grandparent who always had a camera. Boxes and boxes of photos. Years after he passed, my mom finally sat down to scan them so everyone in the family could have digital copies. I was helping her sort, mostly bored, until I picked up a stack from a summer barbecue at my aunt's place. Happy, sunny, plastic chairs, kids running through sprinklers. I flipped through them, nostalgic, until one picture made my brain stutter. It was of my mom, pregnant with me, sitting on the porch steps. Next to her is my dad. And behind them, leaning against the railing, is me. Not baby me. Me at maybe 14 or 15. Same scar on my eyebrow from a bike crash I didn't have until high school. Same stupid hoodie I wore every day for an entire year. Same dyed streak in my hair. I know what I looked like as a teenager. That was me. I showed my mom, expecting her to laugh and tell me it was a cousin I forgot. Her face went pale in a way I've only seen twice in my life. "Where did you get this?" she asked. I pointed to the box. She flipped through the rest of the stack, hands shaking. Every other photo from that day looked normal. People in different poses, kids playing, the grill, the dog. In none of them was that version of me. Just that one. My parents on the steps, my mom holding her stomach, my dad smiling at her, and teenage me in the background, eyes slightly off camera, like I'd been caught mid-turn. We checked the back. My grandpa had written his usual notes in shaky handwriting. BBQ at Linda's, June 98. Baby almost here. That was a decade before I got the scar. A decade before I bought that hoodie. A decade before I was old enough to be in that picture. We tried to recreate it with editing software, convinced it was some double exposure or trick of the light. But the shadows, the angles, the way my hair fell, it was too clean, too real. That photo is now in a frame in my mom's hallway. She refuses to hide it. "If it's weird, it's our weird," she says. Sometimes I catch myself standing in the exact same spot in my aunt's yard, leaning on the railing the same way, just to see if I feel anything. Like maybe someday I'll step into that moment and finally understand how I was there to watch my own parents waiting for me. Story 11. When I was 17, my little brother and I had bedrooms across the hall from each other. One night I had this insanely vivid dream. I was standing in our hallway at night, and there was a man at the far end by the linen closet. He was tall, wearing a dark suit that looked wet, like he'd just come in from the rain. His skin was grayish, his hair plastered to his head. He kept rubbing his neck with his left hand, over and over like it hurt. The hallway light flickered, and every time it did, he was a little closer. In the dream, I knew two things for sure. If he reached me, something terrible would happen. I could not wake my brother up, or the man would go into his room instead. So I tried to move, but my legs were locked. The hallway light flickered faster. The man got closer with each blink, rubbing his neck, staring at me with milky eyes. Right when he was about an arm's length away, I jerked awake in my bed, heart racing. The hallway light outside my door was on. I got up, opened my door, and the bulb was still swaying slightly like it had just been bumped. I told myself I was freaking out over nothing, got a glass of water, checked on my brother, still asleep, snoring, and eventually went back to bed. At breakfast the next morning, my brother looked wrecked. Dark circles, pale, pushing his cereal around. My mom asked if he'd slept okay. He said, "I had a nightmare." There was this guy in the hallway. I went cold. I hadn't told anyone about my dream. I asked, "What did he look like?" My brother stared at me. He was wet, like he drowned or something. And he kept doing this, and he rubbed his neck with his left hand. Exactly the way I'd seen. I asked, trying to sound casual. "Did he come into your room?" My brother shook his head. "No. He just kept walking toward my door, and then I woke up. But when I woke up, I could still hear footsteps in the hallway. They stopped right outside my room." We both looked at the hallway at the same time. A couple weeks later, my dad was going through old family photos with my grandma visiting. There was a picture of a man I'd never seen before. Tall, dark suit, thin face. "Who's that?" I asked. Grandma said, "That's your great-uncle Thomas. He drowned when your dad was a kid. Poor thing broke his neck when he went off the dock." In the photo, his left hand was resting on his collarbone like it hurt. Story 12. I work in a big box store, the kind with fluorescent lights and concrete floors and the same 10 songs on loop. One evening shift around 8 p.m., the place was busy. Carts squeaking, kids running around, announcements over the PA, all that. I was zoning a cereal aisle when everything went wrong. It started with the music. It didn't fade out or switch songs, it just cut mid-word. 1 second there was some upbeat pop song. The next second there was nothing. Not even static. Just silence. No air conditioner hum, no carts, no voices. It felt like someone hit mute on the world. I turned around to ask a customer if they heard that and realized there were no customers. The aisle was empty. Completely. I walked to the main thoroughfare. Every cart was abandoned in place, but there was nobody with them. A half-full cart of groceries. A purse sitting open in the child seat. Someone's phone in the cup holder. No people. I called out, "Hello!" And my voice sounded weird, like it was absorbed by the air. No echo. No response. The bright lights looked a little too bright, edges glowing. I walked fast toward the front registers. They were all open, conveyor belts piled with items mid-scan, screens frozen. No cashiers. No customers. Something was steaming at the food counter and setting off smoke, but there was no smell. I pulled out my phone. No signal. Not one bar, not SOS. Nothing. It was like my phone had never had a network in its life. The time on the screen said 8:13. Seconds didn't tick. I started to panic. I ran to the front doors and tried to shove them open. They didn't budge, not even a rattle, like they were part of a painted set. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw movement back in the store. I turned, and there was a man standing at the end of the main aisle facing away from me. He was the only person I'd seen. "Hey," I shouted, half relieved. "Do you know what's going on?" He didn't turn, didn't move at all. I walked toward him. The closer I got, the more wrong he looked. He wasn't out of focus exactly, but smudged. The edges of his clothes and hair didn't line up with the shelves behind him, like a bad green screen cutout. When I was maybe 6 feet away, everything snapped back. Music. AC hum. People talking. The doors behind me hissed open, making me jump. My coworker nearly ran into me with a pallet and said, "Dude, what are you doing just standing there?" I whipped around. No smudged man. Just normal shoppers. My phone suddenly had 4 bars. The time said 8:27. Later, when I checked the security footage with my manager, I told her I thought I'd fainted or something. The cameras showed me walking out of the cereal aisle, standing in one spot for exactly 14 minutes, staring down the main aisle at nothing. 14 minutes gone for everyone else. For me, it felt like maybe 3. Story 13. When my husband and I bought our first house, I fell in love with the old hallway mirror. It was one of those big, heavy, slightly warped things bolted to the wall, original from the 1920s. I liked the vintage vibe. That changed fast. The first weird thing was small. My reflection's timing was off. I'd be rushing past the mirror in the morning, and my reflection would lag just a fraction of a second. Not enough that you'd notice head-on, but enough that your brain goes, "Wait, what?" I assumed it was the warped glass or my eyes being tired. Then it started getting worse. One evening I was alone, brushing my teeth, half watching myself in the mirror. I spat, rinsed, looked up, and my reflection didn't. She kept her head down for a beat longer, like someone who hadn't heard the director yell "cut" yet. Then she snapped her head up and caught up. I laughed it off. Told myself I was imagining it. You see your own face so much you can trick yourself easily, right? The night that really broke me, I was coming home late. My husband was working overnight. House was dark except for the lamp in the hallway. I tossed my keys on the table and glanced at the mirror. There I was. Coat half zipped, hair a mess, bag over my shoulder. Behind me, in the reflection only, the bedroom door was open. In real life, over my shoulder, I could see it was shut. Solid. White. Closed. In the mirror, the door was open just a crack, enough that I could see darkness inside. And in that darkness, the faint shape of someone standing there. Not detailed, just a person-sized absence of light. My reflection was staring straight ahead, oblivious. I turned around so fast I nearly fell. The real bedroom door was still closed. No one in the hallway. When I slowly turned back to the mirror, the reflection door was closed too. Perfectly normal. I didn't sleep in our bedroom that night, or the next. We eventually had a contractor come to remove the mirror because my anxiety was getting bad. When he took it off the wall, there was a large, roughly human-sized outline on the plaster behind it. Like moisture had seeped in around something? About 6 feet tall, slightly hunched. The contractor joked, "Looks like your house has a shadow." I did not laugh. We painted over it, hung a modern mirror instead. No more lag, no more weird doors. But I still get this awful feeling sometimes when I walk past, like something on the other side of the glass is trying to match me, frame by frame, and occasionally forgets how. Story 14. In my hometown, there's a little park with a war monument. A bronze soldier on a pedestal, rifle in hand, staring solemnly at the horizon. Every kid climbs on it at least once growing up. It's just there. Part of the scenery. In high school, my bus stop was right across from the park. Every morning, same routine. I'd get there early, put my earbuds in, stare at my phone, occasionally glance up at the statue out of sheer habit. One winter morning, sun barely up, everything blue and frosty, I was alone at the stop. No cars, no kids, just my breath fogging in the air. I looked up at the statue. He wasn't looking at the horizon. The bronze soldier's head, this heavy, solid thing that had been in the same position for decades, was turned slightly down and to the right, facing the bus stop, facing me. I froze, convinced I was seeing it from a weird angle. I walked a few steps left, then right. The head tracked with me, just enough that his eyes stayed fixed on mine. I told myself I was being ridiculous. Sculptures can look like they're watching you from certain angles. That's not new. So I forced myself to walk closer, across the street, into the park. Up close, it looked normal again. Head forward, gaze over my shoulder toward the horizon. Relieved, I backed up to the sidewalk and turned around to check from my usual spot. He was looking at me again. I know how this sounds. I know, but I tested it. I walked to 3 different corners of the park. From each of those far-away, bus stop distance spots, the soldier's head had a slightly different tilt, always adjusted in a way that made his gaze intersect with where I was standing. Up close, bolts rusted solid, neck cast fused to the shoulders. No seams, nothing movable. That statue had not been altered since the 50s. I stopped taking that bus. I walked the long way to school for a week. Months later, curiosity won. I went back with 2 friends and told them nothing, just asked if the statue seemed weird. Both of them, independently, said, "It kind of feels like he's watching me," and then pointed to different spots, each exactly where they were standing. We tried to snap photos to compare head positions. Every photo showed the same thing: head facing forward, eyes at the horizon. No matter where we were when we took it. I still live in that town. The statue's still there. Years later, I drove past at night and caught it in my headlights. For one split second, the shadow of the head on the brick behind it was turned directly toward my car, even though the statue itself hadn't moved at all. Story 15. I'm a teacher, and this happened about 3 years ago. Our school installed new security cameras everywhere. Hallways, entrances, the playground. Admin was obsessed with being able to review incidents. One afternoon, 2 kids got into a shoving match on the playground. Nothing major, but protocol meant we had to write it up and pull the footage. The principal and I went to the office to review the camera feed. We rewind to recess. Kids are running around, playing tag, teachers at the edges. It all looks exactly like I remember. Until we notice the extra kid. Near the swings, there's a little girl in a bright yellow raincoat. Hood up, no face visible. She's just standing there, watching the other kids. Not moving, not interacting. None of us remembered anyone being dumb enough to wear a raincoat on a sunny 25°C day. We zoomed in. She's in several angles from different cameras, always at the edge of the frame. Yellow coat, boots, hood up, hands at her sides. In one view, a soccer ball rolls right up to her feet. No one goes to get it. In real life, I distinctly remembered grabbing that ball and tossing it back to the boys. On the video, I walk into frame, bend down, pick up the ball, right through her. My arm, my torso, everything passes through where she's standing. No obstruction, no reaction. The ball lifts off the ground by itself in front of her and flies back to the kids. We scrubbed back and forth. Same thing every time. Could be a glitch, the principal said, not sounding convinced. We checked the camera logs. No drops, no corruption flags. The footage was clean. Every shadow, every leaf movement was consistent, except her. We tried other days. Different recesses, different weeks. She shows up in 3 other clips. Always when the same old swing set is in frame. Always in the raincoat. Even on completely different weather days. Sometimes closer to the swings, sometimes by the fence. No kid or teacher ever looks directly at her. It's like she's not there to us, only to the cameras. I asked around casually if any parent had a little one who liked to wear a yellow raincoat all the time. No one fit. We checked attendance. No mismatched numbers, no unknown kids. The school quietly replaced the cameras that covered that area over the summer. The IT guy told me, off the record, that when they took the old camera down, the plastic casing over the lens had deep scratches in it, like tiny fingernails had dragged over and over from the inside. The new cameras have never picked her up. But sometimes at recess, when the sky is gray and the light is flat, I catch myself scanning the edges of the playground for a flash of yellow, wondering if she's still out there, just not interested in being recorded anymore. Story 16. I was 22, working late in a small graphic design studio. It was one of those old downtown buildings where the elevators quit at 7 p.m., so after that you use the stairwell. Our office was on the 5th floor, end of a long, echoey hallway. Everyone else left around 6. I stayed to finish a client project. At 9:30, I finally shut my computer down. Lights in the hallway were already on their motion sensor dim, this ugly yellow half-light. I locked the office, turned toward the stairwell, and heard footsteps behind me. Not echoing my own. A second set. Slow, measured, a few beats out of sync. I assumed it was cleaning staff. "Sorry, still here," I called without turning around. The footsteps stopped. I walked on. After a few seconds, they started again. Closer, but still behind me. I turned around. The hallway was empty. Our office door, closed and locked. The rest were dark. The stairwell door at the far end was propped open with a doorstop like always. No people. I told myself it was the weird acoustics and kept walking. As I got closer to the stairwell, the sensor light above the middle of the hallway switched off with an audible click, plunging that section into shadow. The one above me stayed dim. The one over the stairwell stayed on. For a moment, there was this band of darkness between me and the exit. From inside that darkness, right where the light had just gone out, I heard someone whisper my name. Clear, right in my ear, except no one was near me. I bolted. The second my foot hit the dark patch, time did something horrible. The hallway sound stretched out, like someone had hit slow-mo on the world. My own footsteps sounded thick and delayed, out of sync with the impact. It felt like moving through syrup. I could see the stairwell door getting closer, but it took forever to reach it. In that stretched-out moment, I had enough time to realize my own shadow wasn't matching me. On the wall to my left, my shadow was a half-step behind, arms a little too long, head tilted the wrong way. As soon as I crossed into the light by the door, everything snapped back. Sound normal, body normal, shadow normal. I slammed through the stairwell and didn't stop until I hit the street. The next day, I mentioned the weird lights to the building manager, trying not to sound crazy. He went very still and said, "You're on 5, right? If the lights ever go out in the middle section again, don't walk through it. Go back to your office and call me." He refused to explain. The only thing he admitted was that a few years before I was hired, a temp had been found in that middle stretch of hallway, collapsed. No cause of death on the report. Cameras showed him walking into the dark patch. And then nothing. He just never came out on the footage. Story 17. For a few years, I lived out in the desert, middle of nowhere, working at a solar farm. The nearest neighbor's porch light was a tiny dot on the horizon. The stars were insane out there, whole sky just glittering. One night, power went out across the site. Total blackout except for the stars. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside my trailer to text my supervisor. No service. I looked up while I waited. The stars were wrong. At first, I couldn't place it. Then I realized a whole chunk of the sky was just empty. Not clouded over, not light polluted, empty. A huge, almost perfect circle where there should have been hundreds of stars, just matte black. I thought maybe it was my eyes, so I covered one, then the other. Same void, and the edge of it was sharp, like someone had cut a hole in the sky with a cookie cutter. As I stared, the circle started to move, not drifting like a cloud. It slid, smooth and deliberate, across the sky, swallowing stars on one side and revealing them on the other. Wherever it passed, the stars didn't twinkle. They just blinked out and back on, as if someone was flipping a switch. The air felt charged. My arm hair stood up. Coyotes that usually yipped all night went dead silent. For a second, I heard a low hum. Not like a plane. More like the sound you hear when you put your ear to an old TV. Then the circle stopped directly overhead. Standing in that sudden, perfect black felt like standing under an open hatch. I had this overwhelming, primal feeling that someone was looking down. Not something. Someone. Not friendly, not hostile, just intensely curious. For no good reason, I shut off my flashlight and whispered, "Please don't notice me." Immediately, I felt ridiculous. It's the sky, right? A moment later, my trailer door behind me rattled violently, like someone had grabbed the handle and yanked hard. Twice. I whirled around with the flashlight on. Nobody there. When I turned the light back toward the sky, the circle was gone. Stars everywhere. Normal. A few seconds later, all the power came back. Sight lights blazing, phone buzzing with cued texts. The next morning, I asked one of the older techs if the grid going down ever did weird stuff to the sky. He went quiet and said, "You saw it, huh? Don't stand outside when the lights go next time." He said when. not if, and he said it like someone who'd learned the hard way. Story 18. I used to take the last bus home from the city. It was almost always the same driver, the same handful of regulars half asleep in their seats. You start to recognize faces, even if you never talk. There was this one guy, mid-40s, suit, tired expression, who got on at the same stop every night with a beat-up leather briefcase. He'd nod at the driver, sit halfway back on the left and stare out the window. Never saw him miss a night for months. Then, one Tuesday, he wasn't there. I only noticed because the driver paused at his stop a beat longer than usual, like he was expecting him. The bus was nearly empty. We pulled away. A few blocks later, we passed a side street. The man was standing under the streetlight, briefcase in hand, facing away from us. It was definitely him. Same coat, same posture. But it was too far from his usual stop, and the driver didn't slow. I almost pulled the cord to tell him, then decided it wasn't my business. The next night, the guy still didn't get on. As we passed the same side street, I looked out. He was still there. Same position. Same briefcase. Like someone had pressed pause on him. Day 3, I made myself look again. This time he was turned slightly more toward the bus. Head tilted, like he was trying to see inside. His face looked wrong. Not twisted or anything, just blurred. Like my brain couldn't lock onto his features. I finally asked the driver, "Hey, where's the guy with the briefcase?" "The one who always gets on at 12th? The driver's knuckles went white on the wheel. After a second, he said, "You mean Martin? He died last month. Heart attack. In his car, before he ever made it to the stop." I thought he was messing with me. "No, I saw him a few days ago. He was on the corner by..." The driver shook his head hard. "Funeral was 2 weeks ago. I was there." He refused to talk about it after that. On the way home that night, I sat on the right side, away from the windows facing that street. Still, when we passed, I couldn't help glancing over. The spot under the streetlight was empty, but in the reflection on the bus window, I could see him sitting in his usual seat halfway back on the left, facing forward, briefcase on his lap. There was no one physically in that seat when I turned around. The reflection was out of sync with reality for exactly the length of our bus ride. And then, at my stop, it blinked and matched again. I started taking an earlier bus after that. Story 19. This happened when I was house-sitting for my aunt in a suburban neighborhood. The kind where every house looks copy-pasted, with perfect lawns and the same 2 tree species on every block. Her place was on a cul-de-sac. Directly across from her was a blue house with white shutters, always dark except for a dim porch light. I never saw anyone go in or out, but there was a car in the driveway and a kid's bike tipped over on the lawn, so I assumed they just kept to themselves. On day 4, I took my aunt's dog for a walk around sunset. As we reached the end of the cul-de-sac, the dog stopped dead and stared at the blue house. Then he started whining, low and desperate, and tried to back up hard enough that the leash burned my palm. I looked up. The blue house was gone. Not demolished gone. Not under construction gone. Just missing. In its place was a perfectly rectangular gap, an empty lot of dirt that looked like it hadn't seen grass in decades. No foundation, no debris, no mailboxes, no bike. On either side, the neighboring houses were normal, still neatly joined by a continuous sidewalk. But where the blue house should be, the sidewalk simply went along the edge of bare earth, like there had never been a driveway. I thought maybe I'd turned the wrong way somehow, even though the cul-de-sac was tiny. I checked my aunt's house behind me. Same front porch, same hanging plants. I looked back at the gap. Still there. Then I blinked, and for a fraction of a second I saw the blue house overlaid on the empty lot. Like 2 images misaligned. Porch light faintly glowing through where a mound of dirt should have been. The kid's bike half buried and half not. My dog howled like he'd been stepped on. The sound snapped something. The next instant the house was back. Solid, boring, exactly as it had been for days. Porch light on. Car and driveway. Sprinklers ticking across a green lawn that hadn't existed a heartbeat earlier. My dog refused to walk past it. I had to drag him back to my aunt's. I thought I'd hallucinated until I opened her fridge later and saw 3 magnets shaped like houses with Neighborhood Watch printed on them. One had a picture of our cul-de-sac. In that tiny cartoon image, right where the blue house should be, the artist had drawn an empty lot. The other 2 magnets showed different streets nearby, all perfectly accurate. Only ours had the missing house. I took a photo of the real cul-de-sac the next morning in full daylight. Blue house, plain as anything. In the picture, if you zoom way in on the reflection in one of its windows, you can see the outline of a dirt lot and a blank sky where it should be.